Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, and I'm the founder and president of the Pixel Project. And today I'm moderating the 12th and final YouTube session of the 6th annual International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Now, through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning best-selling women writers to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. And also, it will help us reveal the first celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. So we'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. And if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project and learn more about violence against women and how to stop it, especially now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, please visit www.thepixelproject.net. Now, today's YouTube session is a really special one because it's our 4th Read for Pixels author panel session. Now, author panel sessions are a recent addition to the Read for Pixels program. The Pixel Project created these sessions to be an accessible resource for writers interested in writing about female characters and approaching themes such as misogyny, sexism, gender, and violence against women with depth, empathy, and accuracy. And what better topic for our 4th panel session than writing mystery and crime fiction in the age of Me Too? And here to take part in the discussion are 3 beloved award-winning best-selling mystery and crime authors who 2 of whom also write fantasy. They have set the standard for crime and mystery over the years. Charlaine Harris, everyone knows Charlaine. Charlaine is the true daughter of the South, born in Mississippi. She has lived in Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, and Texas. Her career as a novelist began in 1981 with her first book, A Conventional Mystery. Since then, she's written urban fantasy, science fiction, and horror, including the Southern Vampire series, which became the hit HBO series True Blood. She has featured on bestseller lists many times, and her works have been adapted for 3, soon to be 5, television shows. Dana Cameron writes across many genres, but especially crime and speculative fiction. Her work, inspired by her career in archaeology, has won multiple Anthony, Agatha, and Macavity Awards and has been nominated for the Edgar Award. Dana's Emma Fielding archaeology mysteries were optioned by Muse Entertainment. The 3rd movie, based on More Bitter Than Death, premiered on the Hallmark Movie and Mystery Channel in January 2019. Laurie R. King is the New York Times bestselling author of 32 novels and many other works, including the Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes stories, From the Beekeeper's Apprentice, named one of the 20th century's best crime novels by the IMBA to 2020's Riviera Gold. She has won an alphabet of prizes from Agatha to Wolf, has been chosen as guest of honor at several crime conventions, and is probably the only writer to have both an Edgar and an honorary doctorate in theology. Wow. Now, that's a whole lot of awards and whole lot of goodness right there, crime and mystery writing. So you, the audience, I have a message for you. You will be able to ask them questions live, but please make sure you're logged into YouTube. Otherwise, you can't type anything into the chat box next to the screen. Log into your YouTube account, type your questions into the chat box that's on the right of the YouTube screen, and Anusha, who's today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Charlaine, Dana, and Laurie. And before we begin, we thought you'd like to know that Charlaine, Dana, and Laurie have also donated some awesome treats to the stash of author goodies over at the Read for Pixels fundraising page to help raise funds to keep our campaigns, programs, and initiatives, including this one that you're watching right now, alive and kicking. Charlaine has 5 book bundles featuring a signed and personalized copy of An Easy Death. That's book 1 of a Gunny Rose series. And Shakespeare's Landlord, book 1 of a Lily Bard series. Now, 2 of the bundles have been snapped up. Thank you, Crystal Weber and Patricia Bannon, for your donation. There are 3 more bundles left. So if you want a bundle and Charlaine will sign and personalize it to you, and make sure that you're in the US. This is for US donors only. Please rush over there to get them because there's only 3 left. Dana has one awesome goodie bundle that's full of this: 6 of her Emma Fielding ebooks, the DVD featuring the adaptations of her Emma Fielding novels, and paperback editions of her Fangbot series. These are signed and personalized as well, and they're ready to go to 1 US donor. And Laurie and her publisher, Bantam Books, have made available 5 Mary Russell goodie bundles featuring the ARC of Riviera Gold, her latest Mary Russell book, and the hardcover of Island of the Mad. Both books are signed and personalized by Laurie, and Laurie will also add in a personally curated selection of Mary Russell-themed postcards and posters to each bundle. Now, all 5 bundles are gone. Sorry, guys, if you're just tuning in now.
Wow.
All 5 are gone, and we would like to say thank you so much to Jessica C. Williams, Moira Tuttle, Jane Murray, Faith Williams, and Gloria Horton Young. Now, we have raised $6,425 so far. This has shot past our initial $5,000 goal, and we are now aiming for our $10,000 stretch goal, and we're trying to get there by April 15. So we are going to need your help. Please give generously. All funds go to its programs like this, and we'll tell you more about everything else after we have our session. Now, onwards to the panel session now. Crime and mystery fiction is one of the most widely read genres in the world, frequently reaching bestseller lists. And it has its own bestseller list as well. And in fact, Agatha Christie, who is universally regarded as the queen of the detective and mystery genre, is also regarded by many as the best-selling author of all time. However, crime and mystery as a genre has also traditionally not been too kind to women and other female figures. Indeed, certain subgenres such as noir and hard-boiled frequently use sexist tropes, such as designating dead female victims as the catalyst for the plot, falling back on tired rape tropes to spur the male detective's character development, making gender-based violence such as stalking and femicide the focus of the plot, and so on. These stereotypes and tropes are so ingrained in certain subsets of the genre that in 2018, the Staunch Book Prize was founded to honor crime, mystery, and thriller novels where and I quote, no woman is beaten, stalked, sexually exploited, raped, or murdered. So with that in mind, the most obvious question to start this discussion is, how can a mystery or crime writer tell if violence against women belongs in their story, or if their story can be told more effectively using other story catalysts and plot devices?
Somebody's got to die. I mean, that's the nature of being a crime writer. Someone has to die, and 50-50 chance it's a woman. That having been said, there are motivations for the person to die that are not mining the person's guilt or making the fact that she is a woman the very reason she's the victim. Murder can be very personal, but it shouldn't be misogynistic.
What do you think, Dana?
I would agree with that, and I'd also suggest that it's like sometimes when you're contributing to an anthology and you're saying, okay, it has to have these parameters. Okay, I find that actually very liberating because it says, oh, they can only be these things, and it's going to be a very personal interpretation. And I think after you've asked, can it be anything else besides a trauma involving a woman, then you might, and you'd have to find a really good reason. But if there's nothing else you can use, but go through all those other options first.
Laurie?
We're talking about a number of different approaches to this question, and the one that comes to mind is that of craft, basically. I think that at least two of us on this panel are old enough to remember when crime fictions all of a sudden discovered incest, and you started having all these characters, and the great revelation was how they had, been raped by a family member. Mm. Well, that quickly became a sort of cliche, and it has nothing to do with real incest and rape and real life.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about writing a mystery novel, you have to be aware of what has become a cliche.
Yeah.
And I think that the staunch book prize that you mentioned, I take it as being not so much saying that we don't want to read about dead women, because the reason that we read mysteries is because we read murder mysteries. And a mystery without a body, whether it's male or female, is a middle grade mystery, which is fine, but we may want something that's a little more substance. But I think what the Staunch Prize is saying, I take it, is that it's become so cliched that if you have a woman, and especially if she's a young woman, if she's attractive, and if she's vulnerable in any way, that woman's going to be horribly treated in the book. And why do I need to do that? Because it's cheap. It's a cheap thrill. And it, as craft, it's very limited. Mm-hmm. So, that's not real life we're talking about. We're talking about what it is as a writer that I need to do to make my plot have substance to it and humanity, rather than just, bring in a man with a gun or bring in a woman who has this horrible thing happen to her.
I was going to ask, I'm sorry, Laurie, are you done? Yeah. I was going to ask, is the award, the Mary Higgins Clark Award, is that the same parameters as the Staunch Award? Because I know it does.
No, the Mary Higgins Clark Award is interesting because it's low key and low violence, but in that one, the woman is the main consideration. That you have to have a woman whose own agency brings her out of the problem that she's in. That's the kind of central concern with the Mary Higgins Clark Awards, not just the tidiness and lack of sex and violence, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting is Ms. Higgins Clark passed away. Well, not interesting that she passed away earlier this year, but when she did, a lot of people came out in the comments talking about how she was the first mystery author that they read as teenagers. Mm-hmm. So she was also actually the first mystery author I read as a teenager. And so, I started my mystery reading career with, wow, these are all these women solving these mysteries. This is great, and then I found out about noir, and I, okay. But talking about the pitfall, let's go to the next question. And we all, as you all said, mystery and crime books, they all feature some kind of violence or trauma. It could be in the character's past or something that happens to them in the story. What kind of pitfalls do mystery and crime writers face when specifically using violence against women in their stories, and how can they avoid them? I mean, y'all were talking about how this is craft, that it could be limiting just killing the attractive young woman in the story. So what other pitfalls would authors face from the craft point of view, from the story point of view, if they decide to use violence against women?
There's always going to be violence against women. but I think the saving grace now is that women are instrumental in solving the crime, and they bring, especially if they're the police officers involved, they're going to bring something to the table that their male colleagues generally don't bring. I think it's great to see a female police officer in charge of the investigation or instrumental in the investigation, because as we know, often women in the force face misogyny not only from the other people in the force, but in their own investigation.
Okay.
We're having the same issue with your microphone, Charlaine.
Yeah, we're not laughing at your points. Yeah.
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 You were laughing at me, I could tell. Okay. Is that better?
It is.
Yes, yes. Dana?
I was thinking that one of the things people want to avoid is having that be that trauma be the only thing that is motivating that character. I think that it's much more interesting if there are other issues that drive the character along, and part of it could be revenge, but I think there should be other elements to the character that make it make her three-dimensional, and because not everyone is defined just by that one trauma in their life.
You're not the crime.
Yeah.
Laurie?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's, unless you're talking about a short story, it's a person's past, a character's past is only a portion of who they are. And I personally find backstory of sort of limited use as a storyteller. You have to make mention to it because it sometimes illuminates certain sides of what their choices are now. But I think we've all come across stories where clearly the writer has not been able to get past this herself. This is entirely who the person is, why she is. Everything that she does is related to this one event. And I'm sure there are people for whom that is true, but it doesn't necessarily make a strong novel.
Okay, so we have questions rolling in from the audience and remarks as well. Just to start us off on a light note, apparently Teal Glenn, don't laugh at her, you will end up dead in her next book.
It's very possible, Charlaine. She carries grudges.
Oh, well, I've been a hooker in one of Harlan Coben's books, or at least a woman who exposed herself at her window, and I feel like I could not sink much lower than that. So kill me at your will.
Rob Hart named a goat after me in one of his books.
A boat.
Yeah.
A goat. A goat.
A goat. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say a boat. That's not so bad, Dana.
Yeah, a goat. Yeah.
I've never been a goat, Dana. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It would be an honor to end up dead in your next book, Charlaine.
I have to say that I find all this talk about violence against women interesting. Looking at Charlaine's most recent series with the Gunny Rose series, which I absolutely adore.
Yep.
Because with that one, all the violence there comes from this one character, and yet she's this fascinating innocent at the same time, and I just love the character. But she's, you have a young woman who's kind of a simple person in life, and she goes and shoots people, and you think, okay, works for me.
I feel really good about that. I'm strangely drawn to women characters who kill lots of men.
So I have to say, Charlaine, the number of subgenres that you have been responsible for inventing is really fairly daunting. I mean, you've now invented so many. You've now got the Western supernatural thriller with these. So, you know, I so envy you your head here.
My head is a busy place. Not as busy as it ought to be, I'm afraid.
So
sorry, Regina, I just took this thing to the side.
Thank you.
Well, as long as we're talking about violence against women, okay. So here's the first question from the audience. So Misty 306 asks, how do you know when to make the violent acts work for the story versus when it becomes too fake or too much?
I think that's just something experience will teach you, or your natural sense of the rhythm of the book. When I feel like I'm kind of getting bogged down in narrative and moving people around, violence really works to propel the book forward, like a squid squirting his ink and going faster.
Now I have a picture in my head that I'm not sure what to do with. I think part of it is paying attention to the story itself and the situations, because if you just say, okay, a guy shows up with a gun, well, we need to know why the guy is there, or the woman, you know, the person is there. We need to know what is motivating them. But you also have to pay attention to where you are as the author, because at one point when I was writing the Fangborn novels, there was a character who was pretty important, and I just got sick of him. And I was done because he was being not a very useful, he was not being the person I wanted him to be when I started writing him, which was great because he was growing away from the situation. I just killed him. And all of a sudden my agent and my editor's like, no, that came quickly. I'm like, yeah, I was sick of him. I'm like, yeah, we could tell. So you have to pay attention to what's serving the story and not where your own head is at. And thinking about it for a few minutes after I got done having my nose, you know, spanked for having just abruptly killed this guy who was annoying me, I found a really good way to follow along with his characterization, but also develop the characterization for my protagonist. So they were absolutely right. And is it serving the story, or is it serving my own particular laziness and ego and, you know, problem with that?
It's fun to write a death scene.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Laurie?
One of the things that is always a problem in a not that any of us would know, but in a mediocre crime novel is that you fail to deal with the repercussions of the violent act. And you've got the you may have a backstory that is entirely shaped by a single violent act, but it's a human being's reaction to something traumatic is not simple. And it's not just that it shapes them, it affects their behavior in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And I think to write about an act of violence that affects a person, you have to be aware. I mean, you certainly need to do some reading into what is PTSD and how does it manifest? How does it affect me? I mean, does it make me angrier and more apt to walk down a dark alley because I'm pissed off all the time? Or does it mean that I am entirely fearful and I'm forever wincing and frightened away from people? Or both? I think that the kind of long-term repercussions of PTSD and how you deal with it both therapeutically and naturally is something that you need to be aware of when you're writing.
I think too, I mean, that's really a corollary to the writing the fight scene itself, where you can't just have people beating each other up and then they walk away. It's like, oh, I'm fine. Your hand hurts, your hand is grazed, your hand is broken, you have wounds, and like you don't spring up the next day and go for another day of crime solving.
Right.
Yeah, no, not so much.
And so it's just the emotional corollary to that.
Yeah, and you know, based on what Laurie said just now, you know, let's hop around a bit with the questions. So besides doing your research, can you share some tips and suggestions for portraying female characters in crime and mystery female characters who have experienced rape or domestic violence or sexual abuse without reducing them to the sum of their trauma. And Charlaine?
Ooh, well, there again, I think part of that is seeing the person who has experienced the crime as being more than just the crime.
Yeah.
We all have a reaction to violence, but in truth, that changes over time. As hopefully you find some form of therapy that works for you, or time heals it, or you feel differently about it if the assailant is brought to justice, perhaps. It's not like that one moment is static in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It changes you, but the change itself is not a permanent status quo.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna recover, or you're gonna regress, or you're gonna have some unexpected reactions that surprise even you when they show up. But it's not like this was all written in stone, or you could read out of a manual what's supposed to happen to you after you've been the victim of a violent attack. It's going to depend on what in your life led up to the attack and what leads away from it. It's very complex. It's not just oh yes, this victim will be forever traumatized and won't be able to hear the sound of a gunshot without cowering on the floor. It's just not that simple and predictable.
Yeah. I remember too, a friend of mine who had been specializing in domestic abuse cases as an attorney was talking about the fact that either he or someone he knew received a wedding picture of a woman that had spoken up against her abuser. And it was this, it was 20 years later, but she was saying, hey, this is my life. And I have this wonderful life now. And thank you for helping me get there. And it was just one of those things that he needs to remember every now and then. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of it's not that one fixed point, and how you respond to it again is the thing. I think just on a wider scale in terms of the genre, I mean, start by writing more strong female protagonists in any genre. And I think that is just going to help, move that cause farther and farther along.
Laurie?
I think too that it sort of depends on in just speaking as a piece of writing now. It sort of depends on where and to whom the violence is done. If it's your protagonist, if it's your main character, then you don't want to leave the protagonist as a victim, because a victim is a passive. It's a person to whom something is done. And that's very difficult to write around that if you have the main character. If it's somebody who they love and are protecting, that's kind of a different matter, is that they can then step forward. But depending on what the violence was and to whom it was done in the book, you're tracing the process of moving away from the state of victimhood and into a state of strength and self-resilience. That's, to my mind, in a novel where the interesting path lies, not the fact that there's this wound in their past, whether it's to them or to someone else. It's how they move around it. I mean, do they become twisted by it? Do they become violent themselves? Do they become negative? Do they become fearful? Or do they find a way to become human? And that to my mind is the main reason that I would use an act of this kind of violence. I mean, we're not talking about a shoot 'em up violence. It has nothing to do with her sex. But if we're talking about violence against women in a novel, to my mind, the main reason to use one like that would be to show that person growing away from it.
That actually reminded me of the scene, it's one of the, well, it's a developing theme in the book, the novel Silence of the Lambs, where we see how Claire has become, she was traumatized, and actually the author, Harris, can't remember his first name. Thomas Harris, thank you. I knew it wasn't the Harris here. Actually hints that she was sexually abused as a child, but it's actually, this trauma she's talking about is more an emotional thing with the lambs. And then watching her overcome both the trauma of her background with her father being killed and another trauma, and becoming an FBI special agent, I think it's really, really interesting because, as a Hannibal Lecter is sort of dissecting that character, you see a lot of what she's up against, both in the federal, in the FBI, but also as someone who is sorting through a lot of issues on her own personal level.
So while we're talking about female characterization, the mystery and crime genre has its share of female stereotypes and tropes, some of which are toxic, not great, like fridging, fridging is basically short for women in refrigerators, whereby a woman is killed or maimed or hurt in order to advance the male protagonist's story and development. How can mystery and crime authors work around and subvert such stereotypes to create female characters who have agency when dealing with situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence?
I don't know if we have to subvert them so much as we could tell them.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch any of that. Sorry.
Oh, no. Oh, okay.
No, Laurie and Charlaine were talking over each other. That's what I
thought.
we
were.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So how can mystery and crime authors work around to subvert stereotypes to create female characters who have agency in dealing with situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, no, I'm waiting on you.
Oh, you first. No, I think that to my mind, you don't so much subvert them deliberately as you just ignore them. I just basically write what I like and then realize that I've subverted norms. So whatever.
I do that too, Laurie, and I always think the best way to show them how it's done is to outsell them.
Yeah. Well,
I think we can have almost anything else at stake besides, someone in a refrigerator slowly suffocating. I mean, there's a lot of things that are important that people would do a lot of, crazy things, fighting crime for, whatever, that don't have to be a woman who's being, tortured or slowly, dying in a refrigerator.
Oh, so we have more questions coming in from the audience. So let's get to them. Here we go. So Rebecca MJ asks, do you agree that ultimately violence is not gratuitous if it offers insight or understanding into human nature?
If it furthers the plot, it's not gratuitous. Mostly. I'm not sure all violence is going to offer insight or understanding into human nature. That would be nice if it did. We would learn a lot from each book. But I think to a writer, it has to be an integral part of the plot in such a way that it isn't just violence to write a fight scene or to write a death scene because it's fun, though it is. It has to move the plot forward in some logical and interesting way.
Mm-hmm. You could look at Agatha Christie, and she has all kinds of emotional violence, and she has some really quite hairy situations, but most of it takes place off the page, off stage, as it were. And so you have that violent act, but it's more about the human response to it and the solution of the crime. That's the important thing there. I tend to think, I'm not terribly optimistic today, but I tend to think that, violence is something that has sort of marked humanity for, forever. And I hope that we can culturally change that if it's born into us. But I think it's as a writer, what you do with it is the key thing, because sometimes holding back and waiting for that one moment where a character sort of is able to take revenge or is able to do something violent to solve the problem is even better if you've been holding off the whole rest of the way, because it's not native to the character. But when that one time when they stand up for themselves, it has that huge impact if you place it correctly. So it's like seasoning. You can't use it by that fistful unless you're making a mess of other seasoning. You have to be careful and judicious about how you play with it. Unless it's garlic, then you throw all the garlic in, as far as I'm concerned.
Laurie?
Yeah, it's the idea of gratuitous violence. I mean, we're going back to where we really started here, is that the idea of craft and where this is coming from. Why are we writing this scene? And if you are simply dealing in loving detail with that act of violence, then yes, it is both offensive and gratuitous. I don't think that you need to write with loving attention to an act of violence in order to use that act in the novel. And to my mind, that is where the difference lies. I mean, and I have to say that it's not just men who write that kind of violence against women. There are, I've read any number of women's books that have these really offensively detailed and unnecessarily, basically, pornography scenes of violent acts that I don't need to know about in order to know the impact they had on that character.
It's prurient.
It seems more common in subgenres like noir and hard-boiled. And you actually answered part of the question that's on the list, which is, if an author's writing in those genres which are ultra-violent, subgenres which are ultra-violent, like noir and hard-boiled, where violence against women is a staple, how can they do so without using violence gratuitously?
Yeah.
And you just answered part of the question.
Well, I think too, for a while, the definitive thriller was sexually based serial killers.
Yeah.
And everybody who was anybody had to write sexually based serial killers. And it became a trope that was so overused and was really, as Dana says, prurient, that I think we've kind of grown past that. I think that if that's the basic events in the book now, it's taken seriously anymore, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I was thinking of Megan Abbott's, like what you might call suburban noir, where there's all kinds of high emotions and emotional violence and sometimes physical violence, but it's not usually against, it's not aimed specifically at women. It's within a community or something. Cheerleaders, for example, from Dare Me. And I think she handles that sort of thing beautifully because it's all complex. It's all really fraught, but it's not the same kind of noir that you think of from the golden age. The other thought I had was, it's surprising how much violence can sneak into a noir story. I'll tell a quick anecdote. When my first Anna Hoyt story, is that me?
Yeah.
Oh no. Let me try this. How's it now?
You're still sounding like a
Nicole.
Yeah. Am I closer? Is that better?
no. The producer said that it'll probably go away.
So
Sorry, our apologies, everyone. We're having sound issues in the middle of this. And just to let everyone know, it's because we have been alerted by StreamYard, who is the app that we're using to live stream this, that this is because YouTube is facing unprecedented amounts of bandwidth being used up because everyone's stuck at home and live streaming whatever they're doing. So
everybody shut up and let us talk.
All right, so Dana.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wrote my first Anna Hoyt story. She's an 18th century Boston innkeeper, tavern keeper, which was very unusual in those days because she owned the property outright. And it's a very short story. It was in Boston Noir, and I sort of went through it. I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. It was pretty chill. I got inside of a character's mind in a different way. And my father was asking me all sorts of things about it. And he's like, oh, wow, this and that and the other thing. I'm like, wow, my dad really connected with this story. And my husband, James, starts laughing. He says, no, you had such a body count. And she ends with killing her father that he's really concerned about how you're doing. And I'm like, no, she didn't kill all those people. And he started like counting them off. I'm like, no, oh. And I realized that it felt it was not that it was gratuitous, is that these are the only ways that she could think of to survive. Her choice was to basically succumb to the way that women were treated back in those days without, if your husband wasn't looking out for you, there was no police force, there was no particular reason for any agency to be looking out for you, then she just found it very easy just to kill whoever's in her way. And I hadn't realized that she was a sociopath until long after I finished writing the story. But it was one of those things, it's like she had all these very good reasons, she thought, but it was one of those weird twists where it's like, okay, it's not so much violence against women, but she's responding to that. And
she didn't have another option, Dana.
Exactly.
She didn't have legal recourse.
And I keep saying that. And James says, she's still not very nice. I'm like, no, but she wanted to live. And so what do you do? And it became this a lot of people were giving me the side eye after that. It's like, okay, well, do you have anything you need to express that we can help you address or anything? No, fine. It was fun. I liked writing that story. I just didn't realize that the bodies had stacked up quite so high.
This reminds me a little bit about the Roald Dahl story, Lamb, I think, where she killed her husband with a frozen leg of lamb.
Yeah.
And the detective comes and she sticks the lamb in the oven, she roasts it, and she feeds the lamb, the murder weapon to him. And it's because she just needed to get out from under the thumb of her husband.
Yeah.
So, okay.
We've all done it, right?
Oh, you remember the short story called A Jury of Her Peers? Where the women who are coming to clean the house after the murder look at the evidence of the woman's life and say, yeah, we get why she did it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a 19th century short novel novella called Trifles. And I think it's Susan Glaspell, and it's someone going through and later on realizing that a murder was done, and they're not going to say anything because it was entirely required. So,
do all of you have any particular tips for male mystery and crime authors who want to write about violence against women in their books?
Yeah, why?
Can you write about something else?
I think it would be helpful for them to talk to women who have experienced violence before they try to write about a woman who's experienced violence. Because this may be totally unfair, but I think there's nothing like talking to someone who's been through it to give you the emotional tone you need to set when you're writing it. As writers, we all have to use our imaginations. I'm sure Dana doesn't plan on killing her father.
No.
No, I would never.
No.
But
I'm very well adjusted and happy.
And I have never shot anyone. So, but I think that would be very valuable for a male writer to kind of touch base and make sure he's getting it right. the first time I wrote a man, I was very anxious about getting it right, and I've lived with men my whole life.
We're all around.
All around, everywhere. Men.
I miss.
You reminded me of there was an exercise that had men reading emails, abusive emails to women, like from trolls, and offering them violence through the internet. And at first they're reading it, and then the men can't actually look at the woman in the face, and then they can't continue to read these hateful things the other men were writing. And I think that was a really quite pivotal or sobering moment for them to encounter that kind of, A, to hear what some other people are thinking, and B, to see what it looks like when another person has had to endure that. So yeah, absolutely.
Laurie?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's always interesting to see these interviews of the differences between men and women, and how men will go to the parking lot, get in a car and drive away, and the women will go to the parking lot and watch every car along the way and hold their keys in their hand and make sure that nobody is there. I mean, even you know, I'm a tall, strong woman, and even I do that kind of thing, and men almost never do, which I think that sort of thing is very difficult to step into the shoes of the other person. I mean, I remember that one of the books that I wrote that I wanted to write from the male protagonist's point of view, I sort of read up on all of the boy writers. and I sort of felt like I was walking along with my, you know, big shoulders and going to go punch somebody up. But it was necessary to put myself in that kind of, in order to write a proper male protagonist. And it's, of course, it's always, I mean, from a male writer's point of view, there's a lot of women around who would be happy to read your book and say, I don't think so.
Because a lot of those you know, boy writers are creating as much a fantasy as we would with werewolves and vampires, you know, for those kind of characters, I think.
After the 15th private eye, you read, gets up out of his hospital bed and pulls on his clothes and undoes his own IV and goes out to solve a crime he knows he's not going to get paid for because he just has to do it. I thought, somehow this is not realistic. This is
just stay in bed.
the opposite of realistic. This is a weird fantasy.
Yeah.
A weird fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally would sit there with my pudding cup and the remote control and go like, nope, I'm going to take another fistful of Advil and
Yep, I'm staying in this hospital where I belong till I heal good.
Yep.
Somebody else can solve that crime.
Yeah. Oh, there's a note here from one of the audience members. I think we should share it. So just to add to what y'all said, Carol G said, I would gently suggest that the male writer educate himself by reading and listening to first-person accounts. Don't use the survivor in person to educate yourself for the purpose of writing seriously. And she says there are so many ways that can go sideways for the woman or survivor.
That's a valid observation.
Oh yeah.
So, what were you saying, Laurie?
No, I just was agreeing that, you know, you don't sit down with your notebook and say, so tell me about your rape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
not suggesting that, please. No.
Yeah, I certainly put that in a bad way, and I'm going to retract it right now.
Oh, and there's a remark from the producer, Anusha. She says, have any of you read something or watched something in a movie or TV that a woman was doing and thought, a man definitely wrote that because it's so unrealistic?
Yes. I read a pair of teenagers in a book written by a guy. The protagonist, a man, had two daughters, And I thought, never, never, ever did any two teenage girls in the universe of teenage girls ever act like this, ever. This guy just does not know.
Yeah. Let's see, more audience questions. Kate Lyons asks, have any of the novels or the crimes against women used in one of your books been inspired by actual crimes?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, but I'm not going to talk about the actual crime or which book it was. So,
I mean, one of my first mystery was modeled on Real Murders, was modeled on a book club that studied true crime, and a member of the club was committing the crimes in the way that they were done historically. So, yeah.
Ooh.
I did not know that.
Laurie?
Yeah, I can't say that I have. And not specific and not consciously, no.
Okay. And Tony Kellner has a question. Have either of y'all encountered situations where an editor has tried to limit what you did with a woman character?
No.
Yeah, no.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
They were smart.
And I think it's probably because, I mean, there's so many women editors. Do either of you have men editors?
I do now, but it's the first time I've had one in 30 years.
I had a woman editor for my Emma books and a man editor for my Fangborn books. And he was just as supportive as it could be. I don't think they would have picked up our books if they wanted to limit what the characters were doing as women. You know?
Oh, okay. So let's go on to the next question in the discussion. So rape culture is something that is present in many mystery and crime novels and is often one of the major plot drivers. Do you think consent is an issue that mystery and crime authors have started tackling successfully in recent years?
I don't know that it's been tackled. I think it's been more on people's mind in recent years. I don't know how well it's been tackled. I mean, if you think about like reading the novel The Thin Man and realizing that, okay, Nick Charles was quite abusive towards Nora, you know, and it's like, and you see there's one thing that they claim that he's trying to do to protect her in one of the movies, but he's still punching her in the jaw. And you think about that, it's like, okay, that's not something that we would think about, like Lord Peter and Harriet Vane getting into. So I think it's become more and more something that people talk about just in terms of that kind of casual domestic violence. And I understand that you're talking about consent, but I'm not sure how to answer that part yet. You know?
I think to some extent, you'd find that more of a question in what, because I mean, adult mysteries normally deal with a murder, which may or may not have a rape attached to it, but it's generally the focus is on the life that's taken. Whereas I think that YA books, the question of does yes mean no and does no mean yes, is much more pertinent. But I think that I think that in most adult mysteries, you'd find that subsumed into the larger question of oppression and abuse and threat.
Yeah, whereas in romance novels, it certainly has changed over the years, and they're very much more aware of feminine agency and yet. So I think there's a big difference between what is popular now and what is acceptable now and what was acceptable in the 80s, for example, and earlier.
Yeah, we've just published a long, and I mean a long, written interview with Jennifer Cruzy, who's one of the grand names of contemporary fiction and women's fiction, and she talks a lot about this because she's been since I think 1993. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's seen everything that's changed in the last 30 years. And it's interesting. I'll send you the link once we
Oh
have
yeah, please do.
this. Given that mystery and crime is one of the most popular genres in the world, what can mystery and crime authors do to handle violence against women and issues like consent and sexism, misogyny in their books and stories in a more thoughtful and thought-provoking way?
Gosh, that practically answers itself, I think. That's what we're all trying to do. If we just write characters as real people, not as stereotypes, all those things will come into play, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is a matter of being thoughtful. It's a matter of being of writing the things that you want to see, things that you want to read, but also things that you want to see in your own life. And so deciding to make those choices. I'm just another quick example. When I was writing the Emma Fielding books, I was really influenced by, again, Dorothy Sayers in Busman's Honeymoon, when Harry and Peter, they were trying to decide how to go about dealing with each other as they're just being married and they've discovered a body in their honeymoon cottage. And they said they're going to resolve to fight it out like gentlemen, which itself is a problematic expression. But that idea that Emma and her husband, Brian Chang, they're both people who take charge, sort of people negotiate it, you work it out. And if you see that, if that's something that you want in your life, then certainly you're going to put it into your work as well, I think. Or if you want to see more of it in your life, you put it into your work.
Laurie?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, what was the main part of that question?
So how can mystery and crime authors go about, if they including issues like consent and violence against women and misogyny and sexism in their books and stories in a thoughtful and thought-provoking way?
Well, clearly, I'm neither thoughtful nor thought. I think it's always a problem when you write of issues, isn't it? And I think that it's probably especially true for writers who write with outlines and pre-plan their books. People like me who don't basically know what they're doing when they start a book are somewhat protected, because by the time we get to the end of it and discover what it is we're doing, it's already done, basically, and we just have to make it more so. But if you go into something...
I think we're all panthers here.
I take it we're all organic rather than organized here, okay? Yeah. But, the part of the problem is if you go into a book, a writing project, with the specific idea that I am going to give kids a role model. I am going to show how a woman can come back from a traumatic situation. I am going to do X. You're so distracted by that goal, you're not really telling the story. And I think that's always a problem. Now, when I get to the end of a book is when I usually look at it and say, what are the sort of themes and subtexts here that I can strengthen, that I can work out and then I can play with? And that if it's a historical book, which most of mine recently have been, what is it that is going on now that would be interesting to bring out in 1925? Yeah. So there's all these things that the rewrite is involved with, specific interests like a woman's agency and her ability to stand on her own. The one that I have coming out in June, you have this couple who've been married for a number of years, and she has to tell a lie, and she doesn't like that. But she has these decisions between, am I faithful to my husband or am I faithful to my friend? And that's, That's the kind of interesting problems that a novel deals with that isn't necessarily solved, but is talking around the deeper problems of who's in control here.
Yep.
And that, I think, is what interests us.
Okay.
I was going to say a really good example of creating that without being obvious. Barbara Neely, who was this year's Grand Master for MWA and very sadly passed away not too long ago. But in her Blanche books, she has one moment where Blanche is a survivor of rape, and she is investigating something else. And I want to say that it's Blanche passes go, but I don't know that for certain. But there's this one point where she's trying to find she's trying to find her way without using violence in this particular book. And there's a woman being abused down the street. Now she hears the screaming and the yelling one more time. She takes out a heavy pan and a big kitchen implement and goes out, and you think, oh my gosh, she's going to go and beat that guy into putty. But what she does is she stands outside the door and bangs the pot and the implement together and yells, shame, 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 shame. And it was one of those moments, like, you think she's going to go one way, but she's modeling it in a way that brings the whole community into it, so that this man cannot live there and continue doing what he's doing. And I just thought that was so smart. And it was, it was one of those things, like, this is another way of how to deal with it. It wasn't that, and certainly she was, because she was an activist, of course. But this was a really cool way of saying, this is not where we go to violence, this is where we bring in the community and bring everyone in to solve the situation. And I just thought that was so elegant and wonderful, and it made a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
I'm making notes here because, no one can actually get out of the house right now due to the pandemic. And reports have been rolling in that domestic violence calls are off the charts. This fight because, you're locked in with your abuser. So this is, we're preparing an article about what people can do, because people have been asking us, we can't get to the person because because of the quarantine. So you just gave us an idea. I just wrote it down.
Yay.
You're not actually going in, but you're alerting the neighborhood and the community about it. And there is a question from the audience. I think it's aimed at Laurie. It's from Maura Tuttle, is one of our donors, and she asks, do you think if some of these issues are addressed, they would take away from the historical accuracy of the novels?
I don't think that any of us would agree with that. No, I think that, I write a series set in the 20s, or two series set in the 20s, but I think that the issues that are dealt with, certainly the ones we've been talking about tonight, are issues that are the same in the 1700s or the 4th century or whatever. The community of women, the dignity of women, the fact that men can't always understand women and seek to control them and hurt them. These are all issues that are true, unfortunately, up to today. The tools that we have may be different today. Certainly, they're different from what they had in the 20s. But yeah, I think that looking at the differences is one of the areas that you can use. That's one of the reasons that I love writing historical novels, is that looking at the past enables us to look at what we are in the present.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. If it was wrong today, there was someone saying that it was wrong back then too. Yeah. There was always someone speaking out about whatever ill in society you might want to think we want to address these days too. And I think that because if nothing else, we can see that there were laws against these things, but it's how. So we knew that on a big level it was wrong, but then on a social level, people were trying to address these things that were wrong too. And that's why I like writing historical. That's why why I was writing the Anna Hoyt stories, was because just to show how these constraints looked back then, and like, oh, hey, maybe not so much has changed, and yay for the things that have changed in the more recent past. I'm working on a series, I'm working on a novel now that's set just after World War I, and the parallels between political events then and political events in the in today are really quite striking. And so there's not so much difference. I like to say there's a very thin layer of cultural difference, and then there's a whole lot of human underneath all of us. So absolutely not. I mean, there's always a way to find out who was protesting these things or working to curb them back in the day. Everyone says, oh, women didn't write in the 18th century, and all of a sudden you start looking for them and they're there.
Yeah.
People didn't didn't think that slavery was that bad a thing, and yet you look and you find out all these people were writing against it, and so it was never right. And that's, I think there's always a way to work that in and be historically accurate. I find that I feel very strongly about that, given my background. Yes, I mess with history and the Fangborn, but that's the only time. Every time else, if it's set in the sort of our own past, I am trying to be as faithful to it as possible. I'm sure that Laurie and Charlaine does too.
And
not so much.
I'm sorry?
My history is pretty fractured in my books, so, but I have to know what it was really like before I can fracture it.
Exactly. So, yeah,
that's my defense, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind is there's this sign that was held up at one of the Me Too rallies. I think someone held up a sign. It said, "Rape predates the miniskirt." So it basically encapsulates what y'all been saying. It's been happening. It's been happening whether or not we are wearing miniskirts or we're wearing mutton sleeves and long skirts. It's always been there.
Yeah.
It's how we're dealing with it now. So we've so far passed the Bechdel test, I think. But we're going to break that now because second to last question. And do you think? And let's talk about men in mystery and crime novels. Do you think there is room in mystery and crime for reframing how stories describe boys and men away from hostile and negative stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability? And can this be one of the ways that mystery and crime authors can break away from toxic tropes that promote, sexism, misogyny, and the dehumanization of women?
Yes.
That's kind of a confusing question to me. I'm trying to work my way through it, but I think certainly writing today is certainly exceeding the gruff male can do and making real male people, at least they seem like it to me, and real female people, rather than using popular stereotypes that we used to see in, say, Ross McDonald. I really enjoyed his books, but they always ended with his detective, John McDonald. They always ended with Travis McGee saving the women, and then they had this special kind of sex therapy they went through on his boat, and then when they were cured, he would release them back into the wild. And I thought, it's amazing how that works, and we don't generally do that anymore, or at least good writers don't do that.
The male romance, Jackie.
Male fantasy.
Male romance. Yeah.
You solve the crime, you get the girl.
It's interesting to because I write a character who, to a lot of people's minds, is misogynistic. I mean, I wrote a series with Sherlock Holmes in it, and people think that he really dislikes women. It's always fun to be able to that up because, in fact, he had no problem with women. He had problems with his own emotion. He had problems with human beings. I mean, he really didn't like men either. And
Yes.
and to be able to show that, as far as he's concerned, if a woman can do X, it doesn't matter if she's a woman. Is a way of opening some interesting doors in traditional mystery fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are. I mean, I touched on some of the notion of fighting it out like gentlemen and wanting to put that in a modern relationship in my books. But I think too that if there are only, as people say, that there are only 7 plots in the whole of literature for all of time, you can break it down into one of these things, then of course, because if we've been making so much hay with just those 7 plots, we can certainly do variations on characterization and, write the worlds we want to live in, I think. That's part of the reason I write fiction, is because either I can right the wrongs, through my characters, my protagonists, or I can envision a reality that, like, hey, I think this would be better for more people if we thought about these things this way in a particular fashion. So I think absolutely, like I said.
Okay, so there are a few comments from the audience. Tony Kellner says, just a comment, but y'all have mentioned making female protagonists real characters to combat sexism in an organic way. But I was thinking that making the sexist human too would help. Sadly, the sexists of the world are real people too.
Alas.
Alas.
Yeah.
Alas. And Moira Tuttle says to the historical, the question, your answers to her question, love the response. I've worked with the homeless nearby, and it's heartbreaking how many women have been in a domestic violence situation. It has been going on as long as there have been men and women. So we come to the final 2 questions of the evening, one from a viewer and one from me. So here's the one from the viewer. Carol G asks, how about the issue of writing a woman villain who does violence to other women? Have you written such a character? And if so, was it the same approach as writing a male villain who does similar acts? Oh, that's interesting.
I have written a woman villain. Because I've realized I was falling into the trap of having the villains be male, and I thought that's not right either, because certainly there are many women who are capable of a certain amount of violence and evil. So I've had a couple of bad women in my books, and it's really the same as writing the males. I mean, writing a character is writing a character, whether, they are physically men or physically women. I think it's all about your experience with other people and using that to craft a character who seems like a real person.
Go ahead, Laurie.
Yeah.
We'll look at each other.
I keep thinking of a book that I wrote a number of years ago called Califia's Daughters, and in it I just basically kill off all the men. The society has almost no men in it, and so the few men that are around are carefully cared for and nurtured and protected, and so everything is left up to the women, the strong stuff, the weak stuff, the whatever, including the brutal stuff. And so the book has bad guys, and they're women. Has brutal violence, and it's by women. And it was interesting to write that, because it really made me realize how it's the role in the book of these actors, and not the sex of the people who are there. So it was interesting to write, a brutal woman.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it all the time.
Yeah, I agree with y'all that it's writing a fully developed character, and just sometimes it's interesting to walk around and see what differences there might be, but generally evil is evil, and it's might be, or brutality is brutality. It might be have a little flavoring of something that's culturally imposed on men or women. But I think generally, I mean, if you have someone who's evil and just you write them as evil, you write them as full characters who have a strip of evil in them. You know what I mean? So it's not just cardboard, bad antagonist character. But it's yeah, definitely.
So leading on to that, from that, just do you think do you put any stock by people saying that there are gendered ways of expressing violence? So women they might go for the same goal. They might be brutal, but they execute the way they execute the brutality is different because of the way they were socialized. Do you think so?
Well, I know that a lot of the statistics suggest that women will do poison more often, but I think part of it might be a way of, it's a little bit less direct and it's a little bit less easy to get caught if you don't know about toxicology. But so yes, and I guess it'd be interesting to see how that changes over time.
Yeah, especially since we're getting more and more into breaking down gender binaries and all at this point in time.
Yeah.
So final question, because it's getting late for Charlaine and Dana especially. What mystery or crime books would you recommend that aspiring mystery or crime writers read to see good examples of violence against women, misogyny, and sexism handled well?
Any of Tana French's books.
I would say Charlaine and Dana.
I'd say Laurie and Charlaine.
I think you all too.
Yeah.
But I think Tana French does a great job of expressing equal opportunity violence, and there are just a lot of people who are doing it really well now. Shannon McGuire in the science fiction field and fantasy field. But there are so many mystery writers who are handling it very well. And I think getting across the point that violence itself is bad, not just when women or men commit it, but it's just generally the last resort in what should be a dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I'm thinking of Toni Kellner, who also writes as Lee Perry, and her short story Bible Belt, which is a really great example of looking at a domestic abuse situation. S.J. Roseanne wrote a really, really smart story. I mean, I love her novels, but there's one short story that she was writing about human trafficking that I thought was really very, very smart and very not cliched, very original. I think there's a lot of folks in science fiction. I think there's a lot of folks in comic books where you have some of the worst examples, but you also have some of the best. So like looking at Peter Connick, who writes Captain Marvel and a wonderful series, not for everyone, is called Bitch Planet. It's about a planet where women are incarcerated when they're not compliant, and it tells their stories. And it's really smart. I mean, even if you think about the way that, oh gosh, I'm thinking of like Rat Queens, the comic, and I'm thinking about the relationship between Agent Carter and Captain America. And my voice is going wonky again, isn't it?
I love Peggy Carter.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Laurie, any recommendations?
I think that you could do than to just go through the list of the Edgar's Awards and the Agatha Awards nominees, because for the most part, when we're judging our peers, we're on the lookout for cliched. Those get left by the side.
Mm. Oh, well, someone in the audience suggested Anne Cleves, the Shetland and Vera Mysteries.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so we have everyone. We have come to now wrapping up for the night, for the evening. So before we wrap up, please check out the awesome goodies that Charlaine, Dana, and Laurie have donated to the stash of author treats over at the Read for Pixels fundraising page to keep our campaigns and programs such as this one alive and kicking. Charlaine has 5 book bundles featuring a signed and personalized copy of An Easy Death. That's book 1 of a Gunny Rose series. It's a brand new series, and her latest series, and Shakespeare's Landlord, book 1 of a Lily Bard series. And what's interesting about her Lily Bard series is that Lily Bard is a rape survivor, and she goes on to help other women in her town. And there are only 3 bundles left, so go get them fast. And I'm going to put up a screen share here to show everybody where to go to get all the goodies. Yay! And Laurie and her publisher Bantam Books have made available 5 Mary Russell goodie bundles, but they're all gone. They're literally, I put them up, and I put them up in the evening before I went to bed, Laurie. The next morning when I woke up, it was ping, 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 ping. Everyone just snatched them. They just snatched them up. They love Mary Russell. Everyone loves Mary Russell.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
And Dana has one awesome goodie bundle that's chock-a-block with 6 of her Emma Fielding books in ebook format. So there's no delay in you getting to read them. And the DVD featuring the movie adaptations of her Emma Fielding novels and the signed and personalized paperback editions of her Fangborn series. So you can go to Rally Up, where we are hosted at bit.ly/R4P Rally Up IWD 2020. This is case sensitive, so please take this down exactly. Otherwise, I don't know where you get sent to. Basically, write it down exactly. Yeah, write it down exactly. Anusha has also has also cut and pasted it into the comment section, the chat box on the YouTube page. And if you want to find out more about this program that we are on, which is Read for Pixels, go to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. Now, if you get to the donation page, the fundraising page, and Charlaine's books are gone and Dana's bundle is gone, we still have plenty of author goodies from everyone from Tamora Pierce, Anna Stevens, Kandara Blake, Leanna Renee Heiber, Maya Rodell, Kat Howard, PC Cast, and more. And we've raised $6,425 so far, and we are short past our initial $5,000 goal, and we're now aiming to reach our $10,000 stretch goal. So we need your help. We need your help to get there, because last year we had a shortfall. We need your help to get there in order to continue running programs like this, and all funds go towards programs like this and all our other work to help end violence against women, including, and this is a PSA for everyone, we share helplines to over 30 countries every day from 8 p.m. Eastern time to midnight for 30 over countries. And for people in North America, in the Americas, it's we have a dedicated North America tweet out of helplines from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time every day. So you can check it out then. And if you want to find out more about violence against women and what you can do about it, please visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. And so now all of us are going to wish you, anyone have any announcements you want to make about any books coming out or in the next 3 months? No?
Nope.
We had a short story in a collection that supports the ACLU Foundation. It's called The Dystopian States of America. So if you're looking for a little bleakness to feel you less bleak now, I would check that out.
Tony brought up something really, really important. Thank you for the reminder, Tony. So she noticed that if there are any aspiring writers, some of the bundles that are available on the donation page, the fundraising page, are actually author critiques. Yeah. The authors will look at your, anything between 5 to 50 pages, depending on the author of your work in progress, and they'll send you a written critique so that you can get some feedback on your work, or to help you with your query letter. So go on over there. There's even one, Anna Stevens is offering to do both a written critique and a 45-minute Skype workshop to go over that critique. So go over there and go over there and look it up. Tons of authors are offering this. And one more lovely comment from the audience. Carol G says, all of you amazing women keep me going in these dark times. Been rereading my way through each of your many series. Love to you all, and please keep writing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
All right. So
I have a story out, and I should mention Mystery Writers of America has their new anthology out in April called Deadly Anniversaries, and I have a story in that, and I have a novel coming out in June called Riviera Gold, which you know. So, okay. And Charlaine, when is the next Gunny Rose coming?
I don't know. One came out in February, and then I turned the third one in, but I have yet to get a pub date on it. So believe me, the minute I know, I'll be widely publicizing that.
Let us know, Charlaine, because Gunny Rose is awesome. So let us know, and we can do a little retweet on Twitter for you, for all our Read for Pixels authors. If you have anything coming out, just tag us, please. Especially if it's about women, female characters, anything like that. We'll retweet it. Don't worry, we'll see. Just tag us. We can see it. Okay, so everybody, all of us are gonna wish you good night or good day wherever you are in the world. If you know friends who can't make it today, this is recorded, but you gotta wait for about an hour for YouTube to finish processing this, because YouTube is facing unprecedented levels of traffic as everyone's home and live streaming everything from cooking to apparently strip Mortal Kombat.
Oh, hey.
Oh, yeah. I completely missed that.
So,
what this modern world of ours.
So everyone, thank you so much. Have a good weekend, and everyone, please stay safe. If you have a mandate from your government to stay at home, I'm not being fascist or anything here. I'm just saying, for the sake of public health, because of coronavirus and COVID-19, please stay in your homes and please stay safe. All right. So, and read Laurie's books, read Dana's books, read Charlaine's books. Their books are available on Amazon, on Google Play, on all the main e-retailers. You can just download it and just get on to reading it.
But don't pirate it.
Yeah, don't pirate it. Very important. Don't pirate anybody's books, please. All right. So have a great evening, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you, everyone there.
Bye, Charlaine.
Good night, Charlaine.
Bye.